Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't be here live. It's 4 a.m. right now where I am, and pregnant wife and sleeping child. If I wake the sleeping child, I get in trouble with the pregnant wife. So this one's pre-recorded. So thank you for having me. Today we're going to be talking about staying punctual with scheduled tasks. As Frank mentioned in the introduction, I'm Michael Dorinda. You can find me at Michael Dorinda on Twitter. I'm the co-host of the Laravel News podcast. I'm the co-host of the North Meet South Web podcast, and I'm the single host of the Road to Laracon podcast, which is a mostly regular podcast around interviewing speakers for the Laracon US conference about their taste in music. It was actually an idea of Freek's for that one as well, so thanks for Freek for leaving one for me. But today we're talking about staying punctual with scheduled tasks. If you can stitch together a CRON expression by hand without thinking twice, this may be a bit of a refresher for you, but we're going to run through the basics. If you are lucky, at the top of your cron tab, you're going to see something that looks like this. And it essentially outlines what it is that your cron expression needs to look like. Going from left to right, the 5 stars, minute, representing the minute of the hour, then followed by the hour, which is obviously the hour of the day, then the day of the month of the year, and the day of the week. If you're using the day of the week, some systems will consider 7 as Sunday, but it's general rule that you go 0 through 6, Sunday through Saturday. In some systems, they also support the 6th star or the 6th positional parameter, which is at the year. And then, of course, you've got the command to execute. Typically, sometimes you'll see in there a username as well. Now, we're all familiar with cron expressions, right? I'm going to run through some very quickly that are going to basically tell you, I'm going to show you the expression and I'm going to show you the expression and then I'm going to translate it for you. So the 5 stars means every minute. The star/5 means every 5 minutes. This one means on the first of the month at 4 p.m. This one is twice an hour at 0 and 30 minutes past the hour. This one is every Thursday at 6 a.m. And this one is 2 days a month on the 1st and the 14th at 3 p.m. Now, by means of example, let's say you need to run a TPS report every day at 9 a.m. Now, you start your day, you're asleep, your alarm goes off, you go and make yourself some coffee, you jump on your computer, you run your report, and there's your automation. But what happens when that alarm doesn't go off? Someone's going to look like this, and depending on how many times it happens, eventually they're going to look like this. So that is where cron comes in. Now, assuming you have access to the server and permission to edit the files, managing cron entries is done typically in one of these 3 places. The etc/cron tab is a system-wide global file which handles cron tabs for all users on the system. If an application or a service doesn't run as a specific user, you will have an application or service specific cron tab entry. And for general users of the system, if you were to log in and run cron tab-e, you bring up your user specific cron tab, and these typically end up in varspal cron tabs and then the username. But you can't do this with VS Code or PHP Storm, not even Sublime Text. I'm not really sorry about that. So running the TPS report every day at 9 a.m. So we go back to this. There is a link in the previous slide. I'll have it in the show notes I'll have it in the presentation notes as well for where you can get this if you don't have this in your cron. And essentially what we want to do is we want to copy that first line and remove the leading hash, the pound symbol. It's a comment. And then we're going to construct this 9 a.m. cron schedule. So the first positional argument is the minute of the hour. So we're running this at 9 a.m. We could run it at 9:03 or 9:08, but we're going to do it at 9 a.m. on the dot. Every hour, okay, the second one is the hour. So we're going to go 9 a.m. Then we're going to throw in the command there, user bin env php, TPS report. We're going to write the file and get out of Vim. So the cron tab, again, as I said, it looks like this. The link will be in the speaker notes, whatever the thing is called. And then if you're ever wanting to have a quick and easy way of going through this, crontab.guru, you can hit that up. You can put in your cron expression and it will show you what that expression evaluates to and when you can expect that command to run. So if we were to say 9 a.m. when I put this together on the 15th of July, 9 a.m. was basically, it'll run next on the 16th and then it'll run every day, 17, 18, 19, 20, and so on and so forth. And so we end up with a cron expression that looks like this: 0, 9, 3 stars, user bin, env, PHP, tps-report.php. So you can have a little bit of a sleep in at 9 a.m. now. But there are some pitfalls to using the cron tab and using cron in general for managing your scheduled tasks. First and foremost, for us as developers, there is no version control, at least not alongside the application code. There are possibly ways of doing this within the operating system that you can track these changes, but typically speaking, there's no version control. Depending on your work environment, you might not even have access to the server to modify the cron tab. You won't have access to the system, or you won't have access to the files. Typically, developers that don't have access to the cron tab won't have access to logs. And usually when a cron entry is set up, it looks something a little bit like this. There'll be an arrow, dev null, to arrow ampersand 1. And what this essentially means is to redirect all of your output, whether that's an error from the standard error or standard output. So just log entries from, or log output from your application, gets sent into effectively a black hole. You could put a mail to entry. So before each cron expression, you can put mail to equals and then an email address. But let's face it, no one is going to read that output. May as well just throw it in the bin. It is easy to make mistakes. Remember our 9 a.m. run? It looks like this, right? No. It's minute, then hour. This is 9 a.m. It's difficult to manage all these individual entries. Let's say that we're Laravel, right? And we want to schedule a major release in February and September. So Laravel 7 came out in February. Laravel 8 is going to come out in September. At the time that I put this presentation together, we just assumed it was the 1st of September at 10 a.m. So on the 1st of February and September at 10 a.m., we publish a major release. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m. is our regular release cycle, whether that's a minor release or a patch release. And then typically every Tuesday, about 15 minutes and then 45 minutes later, we have a patch release because something broke. We're human, things happen. And then one time only, on the 27th of February, 2020 at 4:20 p.m. on the systems that support the year, right? We're going to Livewire Blaze. We're going to release Livewire to the world, and we're going to have a great time with that. Check it out. It's amazing. Now, the cron expressions are not necessarily easy to follow, so you can put some comments in your cron tab, but it's nasty to look at. It's busy. It doesn't really help. And if you don't have access to it, you're not going to see this anyway. It is limited to command line tools, okay? So you can't schedule a job from your application, for example. If you're using Laravel Forge, you have the ability to use this interface to schedule commands, whether it's every minute, every hour, every night, weekly, monthly, whenever the server reboots, you might want to perform some action. And you've got the option to do custom, which gets us back to the 5 stars. It used to cause issues. If you had an invalid cron entry in here, you would have none of you, as I said before, you'd have none of your cron tasks run. So using the custom schedule, this will actually validate for you. So you don't have to worry about invalid ones, but you still need to understand what that is and how it works. So now we come to Laravel's task scheduler. It is just PHP, okay? You already know Laravel, you already know PHP. There's nothing really new here. It's intuitive because it's part of your Laravel application. It is, as you would expect, easy to pick up. So before we had the 5 stars, well, now we just say every minute. Before where we had */5 and then 4 stars, now we just say every 5 minutes. Instead of this or this, we can say daily, which will run at midnight, or daily at a 24-hour time, at 1 p.m. in this instance. And instead of this or this or this, we've got monthly, which is the first of the month at midnight. We've got quarterly, which is the first of the quarter at midnight. And we've got yearly, which is the first of the year at midnight. Happy New Year. We have a single point of reference. The cron tab, it could be in cron tab, it could be in a user-specific entry, it could be in an application or server-specific cron tab. In a Laravel application with the task scheduler, you have a single point of reference. It is the app console kernel.php file, and it looks a little bit like this. So before we had the 09 *** user bin env php, we just have this. We have schedule, command, TPS report, daily at 0900, 9 a.m. It's versioned with your application. you can go in, you commit your entries, you can see in there who added an entry. Hopefully they've got a better explanation or a better commit message there. It could just say whip, who knows? But you'll see who did it and what they added. And that means that anybody can submit a pull request, and it means that you can follow your normal code review process. And you only need one cron entry in one place, and there's an asterisk there, and we'll come back to it. But your cron entry looks like this: star 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 star, which means every minute cd into your application directory and run PHP artisan schedule run, and then send the output into dev null, into that black hole, which is fine in this instance because failures will send out a flare, or they'll ping Sentry, Bugsnag, Rollbar, or Honeybadger, whatever you're using for error tracking. Okay, Laravel is going to handle all this for you, so you don't have to worry about any of that output disappearing. And you can log stuff from your scheduled tasks as well directly with your Laravel application. You don't need to worry about invalid expressions because everything's intuitive. Everything's got named methods. You've got every minute, every 5 minutes, you've got every hour, things like that. So you don't have to worry about invalid expressions unless you're using the cron method specifically, and you need to come up with something that's not handled by Laravel. So broadly speaking, that's a good idea. But as with anything, there are considerations. Remember the asterisk. Don't forget the one cron entry that you do need. If you don't have this in your cron tab, none of your application scheduled tasks will run. You'll probably figure it out pretty quickly. Tasks can be filtered, which means that they should run on a given schedule unless some condition evaluates true. Take a look at this entry, for example. We want to welcome our users every day at 10 a.m. when we have new users to notify. If that user new exists query returns false, the scheduled command will be skipped until the next time it's due to run. So today at 10 a.m., if there are no new users, we'll do nothing. We'll move on to the next task. And then tomorrow at 10 a.m., we'll try again. Or we've got this one, we've got the skip one. So we want to ring an alarm every day at 8 a.m. unless you have a toddler. If you are making it to 8 a.m., you are very lucky because most days I don't. So tasks can be filtered, and it's not immediately obvious when a task has been filtered compared to an error that prevented the task from running at all. So when you have an error, you'll get something in Sentry or Flare or Bugsnag or whatever. If you get the condition wrong, you might have a task that just never runs and you're not aware of that. And tasks can overlap in at least two different ways. So we're going to look at two different ways that they can overlap. The first one is slow tasks. So let's say that every 5 minutes we want to notify our application users of new followers, which is fine. Most people aren't going to have a huge influx of users unless you're this fella from Canada and you start putting out tweets that have got this little fire emoji on them. And suddenly you go from 436 followers to 20,300 followers. And so what's happening? We're running this every 5 minutes. Now, I'm not a designer, so this is a really bad graphic. But essentially, at 0 minutes, we start notifying our users of new tasks. And that takes 3 minutes to run, give or take, and then it stops. And then at 5 minutes past the hour, we've got a big influx of users to notify. So we're going to churn through, depending on how you've written it. If you've deferred everything to a queue, it's probably not going to be a problem. But if this is all new to you, you could run across these things. So 5 minutes, the task takes 6 minutes to run. And at 10 minutes past, your task starts running again and again. Depending on how you've built this out, you might run into issues where we're 80% of the way through notifying our application users of their new followers, and suddenly they start getting duplicate emails, okay? So the best way and the easiest way to take care of this is to just tack on the without overlapping method onto that chain. And essentially what will happen is at 10 minutes past, right, where we're still running, Laravel will notice that the task is still running. It creates a mutex to uniquely identify the task, and it'll go, I'm still running, we'll skip it. So it'll take 6 minutes to run, we'll skip the intermediary one, and then at 15 minutes past the hour, we'll go back to normal. This can also happen with cron, but it's much easier to identify in the task scheduler. Inflection points. What are we talking about inflection points here? Let's say we've got this command that every 15 minutes will fetch new calls, okay? And now we've got our TPS report that runs daily at 9 a.m. we have our user churn report that runs every week at 9 a.m. And for good measure, every hour, we have a command that prints money. This means that once an hour, our fetch new calls task and our print money task will overlap. Once a day, our fetch new calls, TPS report, and print money call commands will all overlap. And once a week, all 4 of these tasks will overlap. And that's because Laravel will essentially loop through any tasks that are due to run, right? So if the scheduler has some due events to run and the filters pass, so we don't have any skipped tasks and we need to run them on one server, we'll dispatch either a single server event or we'll just run the event directly. And what this means is that on Monday at 9 a.m., you have 4 tasks that run one after the other. All right. So inflection points, what do we mean? What do I mean when I say inflection points? This command here, fetch new calls every 15 minutes. The command will fetch all the calls for the current day from our phone provider's API and process them one after the other. Fetch the calls, each of them, call, process, call, right? At 9 a.m., we have 20 calls to process. By 10 a.m., we've taken 50 calls in our contact center. By 1 p.m., it's 150 calls. At 7 p.m., it's 300 calls, and it's a bit quiet at that point. So by 9 o'clock at night, there are 330 calls to process. Now at 9 a.m., with 20 calls, this takes 2.18 seconds to run. At 10 a.m. with 50 calls, it takes 2.63 seconds to run. At 1 p.m. with 150 calls, it takes 21.7 seconds to run. At 7 p.m. with 300 calls, it's 110.8 seconds. And at 9 p.m. with 330 calls, it's 138.8 seconds. So, back to the inflection points. What does that mean? It means that at 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., the scheduler, you wouldn't notice anything wrong, right? Fetch new calls will run in 2 seconds and then print money will run. At 10 a.m., fetch new calls will run in 2.63 seconds and then print money will run. At 1 p.m., you still haven't noticed anything, but this task is now taking 21.7 seconds to run and then print money runs, all within that minute, right? But at 7 p.m., we're taking 110 seconds to run, okay? So a minute and 40 to run. Now, print money, which is supposed to run at 0 minutes past the hour, is now running at 1 minute and 40 seconds past the hour. And then at 9 p.m., we're 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Now, it probably doesn't mean a lot with just the 2 tasks, but as you start to build things up, right? 9:02, 10:03, 1:22, 7:01:40, and 9:02:18, right? This thing can start as you scale up and you add more tasks and more things will overlap. And it's totally normal. It's going to happen. There's going to be these inflection points, right? But Laravel is about solutions. And the easiest solution to this problem is to run in the background. Just tack run in background onto each of these tasks. And what Laravel will do is will check, do I need to run this in the background? And it'll run in the background. But make sure that you are logging. When you send tasks to the background, you lose some visibility. So make sure that you're still logging the output somewhere. If you have multiple servers running your scheduler, which is completely normal, it is enough in many cases to just tell Laravel to run on one of them. And that's just a matter of tacking on one server onto the end of your command. Exceptions used to cause cascading failure. Before Laravel version 7.7, it used to just bail. You'd get an error in task number 2, right? So if your TPS report failed, if it threw an exception, right, your money won't get printed. It's as simple as that. There's a simple solution to that. It is upgrade Laravel. Use Laravel Shift if you have to. It's easy. Keep on top of it. No LTS. So here's the next thing. How do we identify these things that we need to consider? If you have a missing scheduler cron entry, you'll probably look a lot like this when you realize you have yourself a deployment checklist. You only need to do this once per application deployment. Have a checklist. Missing TPS report. Eventually, someone's going to come at you looking at it like this, and you probably want to find out some other way that this is happening. What about overlapping tasks and inflection points? I didn't know. This is where monitoring comes in, right? Monitoring is not error tracking. Error tracking tells you when something went wrong. Error tracking tells you if the generate report method threw an exception. But error tracking doesn't tell you when a task didn't run. It doesn't tell you when a task was skipped. It doesn't tell you when a task overlapped. And it doesn't tell you when an inflection point was reached. There are a number of monitoring options for us in the Laravel community. First and most recently, we have the Sparsy Laravel Schedule Monitor, which is a good option if you're happy with logging into your server to check status, and it integrates with Odia if you're using that as well. And it means that you can log in, you can see all the output in there. If you don't have access to the server, it could be problematic. There's a CRON. It's been around for a long time. It integrates with Slack, Teams, PagerDuty, and so on. It's generic monitoring. It's a good option if you want to combine with other crons or have non-Laravel applications to manage, but it does require that you manually configure each task, right? You need to go and set it up in CRON. You need to go and set it up in your app. It's tedious, right? Might not be a problem if you've only got a few things. If you're using Envoy for deployment, you can use Heartbeats. It does, again, require manual configuration for each task, but if you're already in that ecosystem, it's good to go. And next, and the last thing that I'll talk about is Then Ping Me, which is a new selection from me and Jake Bennett. Then Ping Me is specifically tailored for Laravel. You install it once per project, right? You log in, you create a new project, you get 2 commands to run: composer require, then ping me Laravel, and PHP artisan, then ping me setup, and a unique ID. This won't work for you. This is my unique ID. There you go. Composer require the package, run the setup command. We generate a signing key, we write the configuration, we publish a config, and we send all of your tasks through to then ping me. And it automatically updates. You can stay punctual with your scheduled tasks. And once you set up, we will detect automatically your commands. So in a default Laravel application, you've got a inspire command that runs once an hour. It will update automatically at deploy time if you integrate it with your deploy process. So if you're using Envoy or if you're using a script in Forge for deployment, just run PHP artisan, then ping me sync as part of that process. And it will automatically pick up that TPS report that you've added at 9 a.m. It will help you identify any tasks that are going to overlap, any tasks that will run in maintenance mode, any tasks that are configured to run on one server or in the background, or if they have a truth constraint, which means it will help you identify skipped execution. Now, we said before, a skipped execution is distinct from a failed execution in that it was meant to skip, right? There was some condition that evaluated to true, which means that it shouldn't run. And in this case, you'll see the task did go when it was supposed to go on the every minute schedule, but it didn't need to, or every hour schedule, sorry, and it didn't need to run. It also helps you to find inflection points. So this is a real scenario that happened to me in my day job where a task of mine was taking longer and longer and longer. And when we first started monitoring with Then Ping Me, we would get errors late into the day of tasks that were overlapping each other. And it wasn't until we checked that we could see, oh yeah, this is taking 3 minutes to run, which means the task that was meant to run on the same schedule, on the hour, didn't run. So we fixed that. We put in the we put in the on one server. And we've got the ability to configure our settings for alert conditions. So if you have a task that runs every minute or every 5 minutes, it may not be critical that it reports every time without fail. It could be that you could skip one and no worries. We also have consecutive failure. So we have the consecutive failure thresholds there. We also have allowed runtimes, reports that run once a week or once a day. Your TPS report or your subscriber report or your churn reports, things like that. They might take 20 minutes to run. You send them to the background and you don't have to worry about it. This is the easiest way to get the detail you need to know when your jobs need additional help to run reliably. So we are launching that today, the 25th of August. You can sign up at thenping.me and hopefully you can learn a thing or two about your applications just as Jake and I did. We built this for ourselves and we figured we'd bring it out to the masses. So hopefully I've been able to point out some things that are potentially going to affect you in your schedule tasks in your Laravel applications. Unfortunately, I'm not here to take questions, but hit me up on Twitter at Michael Dorinda, and we can discuss further. So thanks for having me.